Well, you've turned on Sexy Marriage Radio, and I have to say thank you again for turning on Sexy Marriage Radio and being part of what I'm now affectionately calling the Sexy Marriage Nation. And as the group of people that follow and listen regularly to Sexy Marriage Radio continues to climb and grow, we want to see that message spread as far as it can, because we really believe that married sex is the hotbed for sex, and we want it to be all that it can possibly be. So we have regular shows coming out, Sexy Marriage Radio 3.0 fast approaching, and some great things in the works. So if you are new to this community and the Sexy Marriage Nation, welcome. If you want to let us know what you think or have any kind of questions or comments or thoughts that you would love to hear us address on a show, there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can call us at 214-702-9565 is our voicemail line. Or you can send us an email at feedback@sexymarriageradio.com. And everything is read and listened to. Some of it becomes shows, but they all become stuff that helps make this all that it can be. And the other aspect that helps make Sexy Marriage Radio all it can be is some fantastic guests. And I'm excited for today because I'm going to call her a friend now because we've known each other for a little while. But Lorraine Raggi is joining me again. She is partnered up with Naked Bed, who has been a fabulous sponsor of Sexy Marriage Radio for several months now and is continuing their sponsorship. And so she and I are going to just go deep, or maybe not. I don't know. We'll kind of see where this thing goes. But we're going to have a conversation about the idea of communicating of desire. And so, Lorraine, I got to say thank you for taking some time out to join us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And so just so if somebody's new and isn't familiar with who Lorraine is, give a quick bio, if you don't mind, just to introduce yourself to the audience as far as who you are and what you do.
You bet. I'm a licensed professional counselor and certified sex therapist. And I've been in practice for a little over 10 years. And recently, this past year, I've moved over from Texas over here to Georgia to be closer to my grandchildren and to the mountains and to Naked Bed. And so all three of those kind of brought me and my husband this way. Excuse me. And so I'm getting settled over here into practice and continuing on this new venture as well.
That's awesome. And so I guess let's just get rolling with this, because if you're talking about being a certified sex therapist, you've got lots of experience of working with couples in the various facets of their sex life, and then also with individuals in the various facets of their sex life. And one of the things we've been a huge proponent of when it comes with Sexy Marriage Radio is the idea of just desire differences. And we frame it in the context of higher and lower, that one of you is going to be a higher desire than the other. And how we navigate that is kind of the conflict of married life and sex, if you will, because, I'm assuming you kind of agree with me that sex does not happen by accident.
No, it's perfectly natural, but not naturally perfect, they say.
There's a great phrase. Yeah. Absolutely. So I guess when you're talking about communicating of desire, what are you meaning by that?
I like to start with just basic communication to begin with. I mean, if you think of it as two basic components, speaking to be understood and then listening to understand.
Okay.
And then that dialogue, it's a dialogue that goes back and forth in the couple. So that would be kind of where we begin, right? And then
Sure.
Those basic communication skills can transfer to the couple to help them begin to talk about sexuality, albeit that's more difficult than talking about, everyday stuff.
The dishes and schedules of kids, etc.
Yeah, I was just thinking the other day, my husband and I were driving nearby here, and we went by the botanical garden, and the tulips had come up, and
Hmm.
spring long waited for, right? And so I'm immediately like, I'm there. I'm imagining I would love to be there. Um, so in that sense, desire came up within me when I was sparked by the beautiful tulips blooming,
Right.
and I began to dream for like what 5 seconds, but
Okay.
nevertheless,
Sure.
our brains work that fast, and
Yep.
so pretty automatically, it's like, hey, we should go to the botanical garden. When can we go? So that's communication, right? I serve up something I want to talk about.
Yeah, that's exactly. And what's interesting to me is when you're talking about the sophistication of a married life, we're always communicating. Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, to some degree, I mean, I've always said the phrase of you cannot not communicate in marriage because
True.
everything we say communicates, everything we don't say
Right.
communicates.
Verbally or non-verbally, right? One way or the other.
Abs-
We're
Absolutely, because I don't know, having not met your husband, he could be the kind of guy that if he's similar to me in that springtime also means a spike in pollen and allergies. And so the idea of going to see a whole bunch of flowers doesn't well up into this nice fantasy of desire of, ooh, let's go roll around in the flowers for a while.
so all of a sudden, then, if that were the case, there would be a discrepancy, wouldn't there?
It's
Discrepancy
kind of
of desire.
opposite ends of the spectrum. Yes.
Yeah. So
So, what is it that you think, in your experience, makes it such a difficult transition from, we communicate about everything else, but when it comes to our sex life, it's such a burden or struggle, or, there's so much tension that it's hard to break through.
yeah, I think there are a number of reasons why, and so I would want to normalize that as we just talked today. For people,
Okay.
um, that it is hard. It's sex is more complex. It's not just about something we want to go do necessarily,
True.
because it requires us to bring a component of who we are to that relationship. And
Hmm.
so, okay, so while the botanical garden is sort of a part of my heart, part of my soul, part of who I am, there's not as much at risk asking my partner, hey, would you want to just go to the botanical garden,
Yeah.
as to maybe, try to bring up intimacy when maybe, as in the case of the botanical garden, there was that desire discrepancy. So that's kind of, for some folks that I work with, that's already hanging over their heads, so to speak,
Okay.
where one already has a higher desire and the lower desire, and they're kind of like, yeah, so they're already trying to, we're already trying to coordinate two different people, two different personalities, you know, two different things. So,
Yep.
and then you throw in sex, which is so uh, vulnerable, you know,
Sure.
and so it's private. We feel vulnerable. Many times we don't really even have a good language. Now, if I had asked my partner to go to the botanical garden, and let's say I ask him in Spanish and he doesn't speak Spanish,
Right.
what's he going to do?
Right. Sure.
So if we don't have a language,
Okay.
and honestly, in all fairness, I don't know. I would say maybe two out of all the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of couples I've worked with over the last decade, maybe two, when I do a full sexual history intake, have actually had parents that had age appropriate,
Right.
healthy,
Right.
helpful
Yep.
conversations about sex.
Yep. No, I completely agree, because most of the time we're raised in families or churches or environments that are silent on the subject. So our source of information comes from a lot of misinformation, or, gossip, or skewed, or Hollywood, or porn, or, all kinds of sources that aren't really very accurate
Yeah.
when you get right down to it. But I also think of what, because if you talk about the pressures of talking about this subject with the person you do this subject with, um, if you were to propose to your husband, hey, let's go to the botanical garden next, tomorrow, because it looks great and we're both free. And
Yeah.
now I've already got something else planned. I forgot to tell you about that. You could still go by yourself and have some fun and enjoy it, but we don't usually think of sex in that same context. Obviously I could have sex by myself, but it's not as fun as having it with my spouse.
Yeah, it's not God's design ultimately.
Exactly. It is a two-person sport.
Yeah, it's designed to celebrate our covenant. So,
Right.
yeah, it's a two-person thing.
Right. Yeah, because what comes to my mind also is just the multiple meanings we place on the context of sex, on the act, on the word, on all of the facets of it. Right. That, because that's the same thing. I used the joking analogy of you and flowers, it wells up a fantasy. Me and flowers is allergies.
Yeah.
It's like
a whole different fantasy.
Right. That's like, okay, where's Flonase, and where's the medicine that in case something happens with that, I'm going to have to, there's my next couple of days maybe. But sex can be the same thing with a spouse because of all the baggage and trauma and history we can have.
Yeah. 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 So, then there's also the concept of why it's difficult. What about the concept of knowledge or lack of knowledge?
Okay.
Could be lack of knowledge about sex itself, could be lack of knowledge about one's body.
Yep.
Or lack of knowledge of my partner. Let's just say, hopefully we grow as, over the years as we know one another. But let's just say starting out as newlyweds, you really, you don't know your partner maybe as well as after you will after 5 years or 10 years.
Sure.
And so you still, are kind of maybe feeling awkward.
Especially if you're coming from an arena of silence. That's the interesting thing is how often do we find couples where they've been taught, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And then they say, I do. And now all of a sudden it's supposed to be free, have fun.
Yeah.
And how in the world do you make that transition from guilt and shame and anxiety to freedom and joy and pleasure?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a huge leap.
Yes, it is. And so there are some good ways to do that. There are some good Christian books out there on sexuality.
Okay.
That could be helpful. I think of the Penner's books. I think of Doug Rosenau's books. Would be a couple of resources that come right to the top of my mind.
Okay.
That are trusted. I trust their materials, and that that would be one way couples can, learn and just talk. So we're talking about communicating. We're talking about the dialogue.
Right.
So many times I will, in order to make communication and anxiety lessen, make communication increase, I'll actually have couples get a book like Celebration of Sex. And maybe if they don't read it together exactly, but maybe they read it and highlight in 2 separate colors, a chapter at a time, and then come back and talk about it.
Talk about the different highlights. What jumps out to you? What jumps out to him?
Yeah. And then of course the Penners, they have their books out that I really like. It's a duo companion book. Make sure I get the titles right here. It's The Married Guy's Guide to Great Sex, and then Enjoy, The Gift of Sexual Pleasure for Women, which would be great companion books for helping a couple to grow and just be able to dialogue, to saying the words.
Yeah. And that's where shameless plug, Sexy Marriage Radio exists to try to fill that void. Also,
absolutely,
it's to be something that gives the verbiage, that gives the terminology, that gives the conversation starters. Because some of the emails we get that I love the most are the ones that say, we've never talked about this, but then you guys did a show on it, and that started a great conversation, and now here's where we are, and
Totally.
that's awesome.
Yeah, totally love it. Totally love it. So
So if you're talking about just we're communicating, and obviously everybody has, if they exist in this world, they have some basic levels of understanding of communication. But when we steer that, how can we be better linguists with our partner when it comes to sex? Not just the barriers, because I think we kind of understand that now. But how can we be better? How can we be clearer? Or what are some other avenues? Because I think you have the thought of, it's not just what we say. There's other things we can use senses and a lot of other options that maybe we haven't really thought of it in that arena yet.
yes. So one of the metaphors, so this can kind of create a picture maybe. One of the metaphors that I use is imagining you and your spouse on a tennis court.
Okay.
And one of you is on each side of the net. And so good communication has to first serve up, the topic, serve up the interest, or like, hey,
Okay.
I'm interested to go to bed early so we can stay up late tonight and play, or whatever,
Okay.
And
So someone has to serve it. Someone has to serve the
serve
topic.
it up.
Okay.
And it's although not like traditional tennis, this is more like a rally, okay, where you're not trying to ace each other out.
Good point.
You're
Okay.
trying to actually have a rally, back and forth. And so that serve goes over the net, and then the partner is receiving that message, and then they can think about it for the moment and kind of attune to what's going on for them, and go, maybe they haven't even thought about it. I haven't thought about that, but once I take care of, this, and that, I think I could enjoy that tonight,
Okay.
or maybe it's like, man, I can't tonight, but tomorrow night would be great. Would that work for you? So sending back the tennis ball, so to speak, back across the net to communicate.
Yep.
And then I encourage couples, also use empathy, listening to understand each other, and kind of navigating through those desire differences, because you want to know, you want to care for the relationship.
Right.
You want to be sensitive to your partner, both the high and the lower desire partner. And so if they feel cared about and not just rejected, or like, it's not going to be just like, no,
Right.
that's
Right.
Insensitive.
So
That's insensitive.
continuing your analogy, if they allow the serve to just bounce into the corner and do nothing with it,
Yeah.
or they have a kill shot return that totally ends it. I mean, that's not that. Sometimes that happens. Let's be honest. Let's be real. This is married life in the real world. But the goal is, how do I see this as a dialogue? How do I see this as an aspect of our communication that we have that could maybe add some playfulness, add some, even some competitiveness to this, of where it kind of amps us up. It kind of gets us into seeing this is a team thing that we're doing. This is something that steers us towards our relationship, and it's a dynamic that can really be beneficial for both of us, not just the person that's serving.
Yeah. So, kind of pacing with one another in a sense.
Okay.
Think of a tennis rally. If you're both at the baseline, you're going to be hitting, harder strokes, but kind of to each other. If you're, at the net, you might be volleying, or you might be just, having more of a, just hitting it gently over the net, or whatever your goals are. But
Right.
just consider each other, consider each other's personality. And I think that's where knowing comes in.
Okay.
It is about knowing each other. And maybe it's like a person comes back with, what are you talking about? Are you talking about when you say play? Are you talking about all the way to intercourse? Are you talking about massages? Are you talking, because there's like 100 and whatever
No,
ways.
absolutely.
So that can make a difference too, you know. And I think that,
Sure, because that
yeah,
gets into the multiple meanings of what does each encounter entail, right? That because
yeah,
one person could be thinking, I mean, I've heard some people in some of the groups I run and operate with that they've come up with a point scale, you know, like a 10-point scale
uh-huh,
on, and the higher up means the more emotional and physical and mental involvement that there is. That's the, you know, the 10 would be the swinging from the chandeliers. Let's really get at this
yeah,
and make this both mutually exciting and erotic and all of that. And the, you know, the 2s and the 3s, that's just the functional, tender loving, getting the job done, the connection, you know, that it's not as much, it's not as taxing on you. It's really more relaxing.
might
And
even be a foot rub.
well, okay, and maybe we go off the scale, and
Yeah,
it is just a touch, but I think that what's helped them in the way he's framed this is it helps at least set a marker of, he can lob out, I'm looking for an 8, and she could come back with, all I got's a 3, and he's like, okay, well then let's settle on a 4. How's that? You know, or, you know,
yeah,
hey, I'm not even on the scale tonight. You know, so, but
yeah,
I love the idea that there are ways we can approach the subject with our mate that don't necessarily mean I have to talk pointedly about it. I can also use metaphors. I mean, the tennis analogy is great for this. That I like the idea of seeing that there's a variety of ways we can use innuendo and suggestiveness and playfulness, and you steer that to whatever culture or situation you're in, you know, because you and I are both in the South, right? So
yeah,
what means, you know, Southern verbiage is different than Northern, and that's not even to mention the fact that we have a lot of listeners that aren't even in the States. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
applying it to what is your worldview and your culture gives you a lot of room and latitude to do some things with this. And maybe you could steer it that way to make the communication even better.
Yeah, I think so. And I think um, being assertive, being somewhat direct, but also maybe giving your spouse an out, you know, being open, like you were saying, to, I'm in for an 8, but you're in for a 3. So let's, like, how could we negotiate in a good way, a win-win at a
Okay.
4 or 5?
Sure.
Because what I would say is neither partner should either quote unquote win or lose.
Right.
We shouldn't be losing our soul. We shouldn't be I don't know, left out in the dark, whatever, whatever phrase you want to use.
Right.
But it's really about caring and finding a way to love one another,
Right.
right?
And
In
that's the whole goal, I think, isn't it? That's the point of, how do I be more engaged in loving and caring and showing compassion and passion and service even to my
yeah,
mate.
yeah, yeah,
So,
totally.
I want to transition just as we kind of start wrapping this up, Lorraine, of with naked bed, because I know there's some different things that it's not just lingerie for your bed as far as the sheet the I just lost the frame. It's naked bed. Finish the phrase.
A sensual sheet.
Sensual sheet. Thank you. I don't, that just totally went out of my head for a second.
No
But
problem.
it's not just that. So kind of steer it to how can what Naked Bed has help with communication?
Well, okay, good. Thank you. That's good. So as long as the couple decides ahead of time the meaning of it, I
Okay.
would say they could, like, set out their bottle of massage oil in a place that's very visible, that
Okay.
says, indicates, hey, here's my kind of nonverbal communication of my desire tonight to share massages. Or
That's good.
maybe they actually set out their exotic freedom, you know, on the bed. Or
Yeah, I
um,
think that's a clear signal of, you know, if you
and
walk in, if I walk in and Pam's got the the naked bed sheet laying across the bed, it's kind of a clear, hey, I know what's going on later or now or at some point.
Your lavish luxe is ready. And
Yes, there you
yeah.
go. I like that signal, Pam. If you're listening to this episode, hint, hint. But but it's just so, because it is one of those things that's a tool we can use to approach a subject that maybe we're a little more fearful of bringing up in other ways.
Absolutely. And for some, a massage in itself, maybe starting with even just a back massage,
Okay.
is less vulnerable, less risky, but yet can tune into the sensual side of things
Mm-hmm.
that can help them feel over time, can help them feel more and more comfortable to touch or to, the being relaxed together.
Right.
Um, you know,
Because sometimes that could be enough in and of itself. It's just it's an intimate massage session.
yes,
Sex isn't involved. It truly is just the sensual touch that has just that bond, just that skin to skin contact, that caring for one another.
yeah, absolutely. There's, like I said before, there's, I don't know, on a scale of 1 to 100, there's any number of ways to be intimate.
Yes.
I think the broader the repertoire of ways of being together, and as we're talking, of course, you could use naked bed products and to do that, to facilitate that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a beautiful thing. And then just the concept of naked bed, making it more special, to where, there is more of a sensual feel to the bedding that you're using, to the
Right.
product. And it creates fun. Had
Yeah.
one comment from a lady. She's like, somehow it just makes it more fun. Like, we have a great sex life, but now it's even more fun.
Well,
So,
and this is to me, if you're not familiar with naked bed, then you want to go to sensualbedding.com and check out there. If you use the word sexy at checkout, you get a free bottle of massage oil. But it's also one of those things that it's the coolest thing about what you guys offer, what you and Andrea have created, is it allows for simple ways of variety,
yeah,
of just changing things up, because we all get caught as humans, as human beings, we get caught in routine world, and sex is no different. And so sometimes just a simple little candle that, you know what, I'm going to light this, and it also can double as a massage oil, or just a straight massage oil, or one of the sheets that, there are a variety of different sizes, some that strap onto the bed so they're more secure, and you
yeah,
can be a little more involved if you want. But there's all kinds of different patterns. But it's just, you think of it, those are easy, sensual ways to change up the routine, which to me is also then changing up our communication, changing up our desires, because we all have it, right?
we do. And I would just kind of summarize it of, transform your bed and transform your sex life.
Yep.
It's such a simple thing that it's but yet it's not.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at that. If you look at the metaphor of sex throughout just relationships, it's a simple concept of we all have a basic fundamental understanding of what goes where, right? There's only so many things you can do, but there's also so many things you can do when you get to the deeper levels of meanings and the deeper level of contact and variety and erotic and all of that it just changes everything. It's just like your analogy of tennis. There's so many different ways you can play tennis, right? As far
True,
as how
absolutely.
serious you want to be, different rules. You want to play full, only aspects of the court. There's so many different games you can play within the game.
Absolutely.
Well, Lorraine, this has been fun.
Thank
So
you. I enjoyed it too.
thank you for talking us through, just because that is one of those things that's interesting to me, is this idea of how do I communicate a desire, knowing it may not be the same as what my partner's desire is, but I still have to play my side of the court.
Absolutely. Otherwise, it wouldn't be happening, maybe.
Exactly. Well, this has been Sexy Marriage Radio. Wherever you are, whatever you've been doing, thank you for taking some time out of your day to spend it with us. So if we left something undone or you want a little bit more, feedback at sexymarriageradio.com. We'll see you next time.